The rain was pouring heavily. It drummed against the windshield as if trying to deter anyone brave enough to venture out in such weather. In the dim glow of the headlights, peculiar glints danced, further obscuring visibility. It was too late to turn back now, as most of the journey lay behind them. At the bend, Melvin lost control. Gripping the wheel, he hit the brakes and cursed, the front wheel hanging precariously over the edge. "Well, there it is," he said to his companion. Rebecca froze, her face drained of color. Melvin threw on his jacket and cautiously stepped out of the car, circling it. Minor damage. He just needed to reverse. His parents were waiting, worrying. Today was a special day. Melvin Rogers was taking his fiancée Rebecca to the village of Mount Valley to meet his parents. Despite nearly a year of dating and even living together, Rebecca hadn't officially met Melvin's family yet. The rain ceased as abruptly as it had begun. With frozen hands, Melvin fished out a cigarette and lit it. Trouble seemed to follow them since morning. Rebecca complained of a headache and fretted over minor issues at one of her pastry shops. For the first time in a long while at the auto repair shop, Melvin encountered a problematic client. Coming in with a breakdown that would take at least a week to fix, the man caused a scene, accusing the staff of incompetence and unprofessionalism. It threw Melvin off balance. He always did his job well, striving to solve any customer's problem. So, such accusations were entirely unfounded. What was most frustrating was that the garage director, Donald Holland, didn't bother to investigate the situation and find Melvin. He didn't argue. It would only sour his mood, and he wanted to remember this day with different emotions. Melvin's parents had struggled for years after his divorce and separation from his daughter. Their only son was the meaning of their lives, and they took any of his failures as their own. Melvin genuinely loved them. They were kind, and they loved Gina, his first wife. Her father passed away back in the 90s, and her mother lived for 5 years after his death, but the woman never quite recovered from the grief. "You have good parents," Gina would tell Melvin. "Sometimes I feel like they love you more than me," he'd reply. His mother, who had grown so attached to her beloved daughter-in-law, still harbored hope that Gina and Melvin would realize their mistake. When he told them he had started dating Rebecca Stewart, a well-known businesswoman in town, his mother assumed it wouldn't last long. Of course, Melvin wasn't going to heed his mother's advice. But still, now that they were heading towards marriage, it was important to him that his mother accepted Rebecca. Melvin knew for sure that his mother would see the true love between them from the very beginning. Despite rumors, Melvin was marrying Rebecca not out of greed. People only see what they want to see. Many acquaintances sarcastically asked Rebecca what she saw in a poor mechanic, and the most malicious of them directly stated that he was marrying her solely for money. Alas, people were thinking in stereotypes. Melvin finished his cigarette and flicked it away, instinctively stamping out the butt. He knew that fires often occurred here. He returned to the car and started off slowly. Melvin focused on the road as the radio came to life. The lively voice of the announcer finally broke through the crackling static. "Showers are expected in some areas, the air temperature will drop to +8 degrees, and wind gusts will reach up to 25 meters per second, he reported. "The weather isn't pleasing," sighed Rebecca, glancing at Melvin. She turned to look out the window. There was something subtly sensual about her strict appearance, in the way her warm cashmere sweater hugged her delicate skin, in the sparkle of the small mosaic brooch on her chest, in every movement, every word, and every glance. "Are you upset about something?" Melvin asked, lowering the music. "Yes, a problem has arisen, a serious one," Rebecca replied. "Children got poisoned at a kid's party and they only ate our cake. They're going to investigate it thoroughly, and they might even shut us down," she sighed. "I don't understand how this could have happened. All the other products are fine, and I know for sure that cake was fresh. Edith is trying to solve the problem, but it would be better if I were there too." "Well, we'll try not to stay long at my parents'," Melvin replied. "It's already evening anyway. We'll be back in the city tomorrow morning. You know, our parents are waiting for us." "Yes, I understand," Rebecca replied dryly. "I was getting ready for the meeting too, bought some gifts. But why does everything have to happen at the worst times, and this bracelet, The stupid clasp keeps coming undone and digging into my skin. Rebecca clicked the clasp of her bracelet. She never took off this piece of jewelry. The golden bracelet, adorned with emeralds forming a snake reaching for ruby apples, was a Stewart family heirloom, passed down for over 100 years. Rebecca's mother had given it to her daughter shortly before her death, saying it would protect her. "Well, as soon as we arrive, I'll take you to a trusted jeweler. He'll fix it quickly. Don't worry about this clasp, please," Melvin said gently, taking her hand. From the very first moment of their acquaintance, Melvin wanted Rebecca to feel comfortable with him, to be able to relax and not worry about anything. And it seemed he was doing a great job at it, because taking responsibility for a woman didn't always require a lot of money. Melvin had seen this multiple times. The men who courted Rebecca before him always operated from a position of financial power. Impressive sums of money in their accounts allowed them to buy comfort and a semblance of security. The comical entourage of her ex-boyfriend Scott Powers was a case in point. Two caricature thugs, as if lifted from the pages of a tabloid crime report, trailed their boss. They strutted around with an air of importance, exchanging gestures understood only between them. Scott prided himself on the level of security he could provide for his beloved. However, Rebecca couldn't shake the feeling of a constant, invisible threat when she was around him. Melvin didn't have money or bodyguards, but he knew for certain that he would deal with anyone who dared to threaten Rebecca in any way. However, nothing like that ever happened in her life. Of course, Rebecca was a well-known figure in their small town. 15 years ago, she started baking cakes right in her own kitchen. Homemade baking was different from store-bought. And over time, acquaintances and friends began ordering cakes from Rebecca. She worked tirelessly, honing her craft. People had to book her desserts a week in advance. After a year, she saved up enough money for courses with a renowned pastry chef, after which her homemade baking turned into true works of art. Rebecca created incredible decorations from fondant, berries, and cream, turning each of her cakeys into a little masterpiece. A year later, she realized it was time to take things to the next level. She hired an assistant, rented a small workshop on the outskirts of town. To this day, she fondly remembered those sleepless, creatively charged nights in that semi-basement but very cozy space, which allowed her to build a stable business. Today, Rebecca had 3 coffee shops and a large pastry workshop. She gave interviews to local magazines, participated in exhibitions, and conducted business development masterclasses. But most importantly, she loved the business to which she dedicated all her free time. Her energy, diligence, and enthusiasm added attractiveness to her, endowing her beauty with deep meaning. Rebecca had many admirers. Men fell in love with her bottomless eyes, slender figure, and luxurious locks. Upon first meeting her in person, she captivated them with her charm. However, Rebecca was lonely. By the age of 43, she still hadn't found her soulmate. Several years ago, she lost her parents. After that, Rebecca began to think that she needed a close person in her life. Her friends hinted that it wouldn't hurt for her to lower her standards. But Rebecca didn't plan to marry just for the sake of it. She believed that she would definitely find her man, not for social approval, but to have someone to hold hands with, to love, and to feel completely safe with. And Melvin turned out to be that man. Yes, he was a simple mechanic who, after his divorce, left his wife and daughter all his property and started afresh. He rented an apartment and worked diligently, so he probably couldn't compete with Scott in terms of income. But Melvin was a genuine, honest, noble man. Many called their relationship a mismatch. However, Rebecca said that this was exactly how she envisioned her feminine happiness. As they approached Mount Valley, the road worsened. Bumpy asphalt and incessant rain forced Melvin to slow down. It was dangerous to go any faster. But Rebecca couldn't leave the city earlier. The tension in the car persisted. Rebecca was preoccupied with problems that threatened her business. Melvin even felt like Rebecca didn't really want to go to the village and was doing it out of politeness. Yet, even if they turned around now and headed back to the city, they wouldn't arrive until late at night. Melvin didn't know how to help his beloved woman. In such moments, he mentally chastised himself and spiraled into thinking he wasn't the one who should be by her side. He believed that solving her problems was his duty, but all he could do now was simply hold her hand. However, Rebecca had often said that this was the most precious thing to her. There were less than 15 kilometers to Mount Valley when they suddenly noticed a strange dim light in the distance. "I wonder what's shining over there," Rebecca pondered, squinting. "There's nothing here, and there shouldn't be anything, right?" "It looks like a car parked on the shoulder," Melvin replied, peering into the darkness. "But the light isn't from the road, it seems to be coming from below, from the field." Rebecca tried to make out something through the wet side window. As they approached the source of light and slowed down, it became clear. There was a car in the ditch, which must have recently skidded off the road. "What a horror!" exclaimed Rebecca. "And no one around. Melvin, we need to help." "Of course," nodded the man. "You stay in the car and I'll see what's there." With these words, Melvin quickly got out and ran to the edge of the road. Within a minute, he returned, partially opened the door, and peered inside the car, shouting, "Rebecca, there's a person inside. A woman, most likely unconscious. Call an ambulance." "But I can't get a signal here," she said anxiously, looking at the display. "There's absolutely no network." "Damn it," cursed Melvin. "All right, Rebecca, you stay here and I'll go down and see if this woman is even alive." Melvin began to descend into the ditch, trying not to slip on the wet grass. The car was about 20 meters away from the road. From a distance, there were no visible damages. Most likely, it had simply skidded off the road without major impacts. Melvin approached the car and opened the door. The woman was still in the driver's seat. Her head lay on the steering wheel. Strands of black hair completely covered her face, making it unclear if she was injured. For a few seconds, Melvin tried to recall if it was permissible to change the position of a person who found themselves in such a situation and how to check if the woman was alive. He reached out to her, gently touching her shoulder, and immediately heard a groan. Understanding that the stranger was alive, Melvin attempted to ease her body onto the seat, gently supporting her head. When he saw the girl's face, he froze for a moment. At the same moment, a sharp pain pierced his skull. Melvin lost consciousness. Memory is a strange thing. It's as malleable as clay, which can be molded into any shape. From the same lump, one might produce an ugly crooked pot, while another crafts an elegant vase. So it is with memory. People might think that events are stored in their consciousness just as they occurred. But it's only an illusion. The brain distorts everything, sometimes altering it beyond recognition. And if someone persistently convinces a person that something happened in the past when it didn't, memories can emerge out of thin air. The line between reality and fiction blurs. And this was precisely what was happening to Melvin now. He lay on the hospital bed, trying to sort out his thoughts. They were jumbled, scattering in different directions and piling up on each other. Through the pain, he made a tremendous effort to recall all the recent events. But when Melvin recounted everything, he was suddenly told that it was all wrong. He wasn't in the place he indicated, and there was no car in the ditch either. They found him in a completely different area, in the woods. And most terrifyingly, Rebecca had vanished without a trace. "So, you're saying you don't remember anything at all, right?" Investigator Harry Cooper sat on a chair in the hospital room next to Melvin's bed, jotting down notes on a sheet of paper. "I'm telling you, I only remember bits and pieces," Melvin replied barely audibly, touching the bandaged top of his head with his fingertips. "We pulled over on the road, noticing a car in the ditch. I got out to help, approached, and then I got hit, it seems. And then, I remember some unfamiliar people were pulling me out of our car." "Your car?" the policeman asked, not looking up from his notes. "Make, owner, plate number." "It's a BMW 525, plate number 7 Wasunbean, owned by Rebecca Stewart," Melvin replied. "Well, you were found in that car in the wooded area 30 kilometers from where you supposedly got hit on the head," the investigator reminded him. "Why supposedly?" Melvin asked. "Because your words don't match the facts. According to the MRI results, you have a mild concussion." The investigator flipped through his papers. "It's strange that such a minor injury would cause such a prolonged loss of consciousness and memory impairment, although it's possible, yes." "Well, you just answered your own question." Melvin understood where the policeman was leading the conversation. He didn't know how to respond to his words properly yet. "I may have answered that question, but the rest remain open. the investigator said. So far, I can't see any logic in your testimony or in the actual events. According to you, all this happened a few kilometers from Mount Valley, yet you were found near Pikeville. How and why was this journey made? I want to know that as much as you do, Melvin agreed. All right, you lived in Rebecca Stewart's apartment, correct? The policeman asked. Yes, that's correct. Okay, were there any disputes between you regarding finances? No, there weren't, Melvin said without lifting his head. Melvin knew the investigator didn't believe him. Everything that happened the day before merged into a colorful delirium in Melvin's mind. However, now he realized the most unpleasant truth. The police didn't rule out his involvement in Rebecca's disappearance. Melvin's memories were fragmented. Sometimes unfamiliar faces, circling vultures, and the light of lanterns appeared in his consciousness. And Rebecca, running off into the distance. Sometimes he fell into a heavy sleep full of nightmares, feeling a crushing pain in his head. When he woke up, Melvin couldn't understand where he was or separate real events from dreams. Where did his Rebecca disappear to? After all, there was no one else on the road. Or did she herself go into that dark cave to hide from the vultures? Melvin frowned. What cave? What vultures? Most of all, Melvin wanted to rid himself of all thoughts altogether, feeling a clean, healing emptiness in his head. The next time he woke up, he realized he was not in the hospital but in prison. Melvin didn't know the exact name of this place. It was probably a detention center. His thoughts were clearer now. Melvin would have to deal with all this nightmare that happened not in a dream, but in his real life. Never before had Melvin felt so powerless. He had always relied on himself, tried to live honestly, and fate had spared him from misfortunes. The divorce from his ex-wife was his biggest life failure. Melvin left everything to Gina, the apartment, the country house, the car. Everyone around him said that now was not the time for nobility and he should file for property division. However, what remained with Gina was the most precious thing in Melvin's life, their daughter, Deborah. Dividing the property would automatically worsen Deborah's living conditions. That's why Melvin decided to leave everything to her and start a new life from scratch. He continued to work as a car mechanic, rented a small apartment, tried to take on as many orders as possible to earn money. Within a year, Melvin saved up for a car and began to consider opening his own auto repair shop. All that remained was to save up enough money for the starting capital. And then she appeared, Rebecca. She accidentally drove into the auto repair shop with a flat tire. Their firm was modest. The auto repair shop was located at the entrance to the city, so the owner of the luxurious white car could only end up in this place by pure chance. The workday had already ended by that time. Only Melvin remained in the workshop. He had already changed to go home when she approached the gates. Elegant, charming, in a light blue dress with her hair fluttering in the wind. Despite her external gloss, the woman looked upset and very tired. "You're not working anymore? Oh, what am I going to do?" she pleaded, her voice trembling. "Could you please take a look at my wheel? I beg you." Melvin glanced briefly at the tire. "Well, the tire is torn. Do you have a spare?" He changed back, brought his tools, and quickly put on the spare wheel. The job took no more than 20 minutes, and all this time the woman looked at Melvin with undisguised admiration. You did it so lightning fast," she said. "And I rarely go to auto repair shops. It usually takes ages. So tell me, where can I get a new tire now, huh?" "I can help you order it through us," Melvin replied, feeling a bit embarrassed. "Then order it and I'll leave you my phone number," she said with delight. With these words, the woman handed Melvin a glossy business card. "Rebecca Stewart, Magnolia Pastry Chain," Melvin read. Judging by Rebecca's questions, it was unlikely that there was a man with her. What was strange, the owner of a pastry chain, incredibly beautiful and wealthy, was alone. However, it wasn't worth thinking in stereotypes. For women of such caliber, having a husband was hardly a prerequisite for being considered successful. Melvin left his phone number for the client and found the necessary tire in the evening. He immediately sent Rebecca all the details and spent a long time admiring the photo that was set as her Messenger profile picture. In the photo, she looked exactly the same as in real life. Modern girls like to post retouched photos, and then you meet them in real life, and you don't recognize them at all. But with Rebecca, it was the opposite. Her natural beauty was enhanced by elegance and grace that couldn't be conveyed through a photo. Melvin decided to look at her other pictures on social media. He quickly found her profile and began opening the photos one by one, accidentally clicking on the Add Friend button. I'm an idiot, the man thought in horror. If I cancel the request now, she'll see it anyway, and I'll look like a complete idiot. And if I leave it, right, I'll still look like an idiot. She's just a client, and I'm not even on her level. A few seconds later, Melvin saw the message on his smartphone screen. Rebecca Stewart has accepted your friend request. Well, now I'll have to explain myself, he sighed. You look like an actor from old Hollywood, she suddenly wrote, liking the only photo on his profile. And there it was. Without any hesitation or pretense, this confident woman was the first to compliment him. In response, Melvin wrote that she was the most beautiful woman he had ever met in his life. And it was the plain truth. Their romance unfolded unexpectedly, swiftly. They could talk for hours, understanding each other with just a glance. Melvin realized he was constantly seeking her gaze and was immediately frightened by it. Fear was born alongside love, as if it were its twin brother. Melvin sought to delight Rebecca in any way he could. He arranged romantic dinners on the rooftop, arranged for street musicians, organized a hot air balloon ride, and a private screening of her favorite movie in the cinema. It didn't require a lot of money. It required a sincere desire to make his beloved woman happy. And now, with Rebecca gone, everything lost its meaning for him. It was painful to think about what could be happening to her now. Melvin was in his cell, thinking about how his parents were coping. The day dragged on unbearably long. Nothing was happening, and that made it even worse. No one answered his questions. Just wait, the guard said. That was the only thing Melvin heard directed at him all day. Another day passed in the same state of non-existence, slowly driving him insane. Early in the morning, Melvin was taken to the investigator's office. Well, take a seat, Melvin, Mr. Cooper motioned to a chair. I hope this morning will be your last, the last one spent in prison. You've got jokes, Mr. Cooper, Melvin chuckled. Good morning to you, too. So, it seems we've found a witness. He's coming up here with his wife. Hopefully, we'll clarify something now, the investigator said. Melvin didn't have a chance to respond because a tall woman with a voluminous hairstyle entered the room. She was leading a thin man who was half her size, and clearly not entirely sober. Oh, here he is, he's alive, the man shouted from the doorway, bulging his eyes and pointing at Melvin. Well, Higgins, things cleared up pretty quickly, huh? Cooper laughed. But you still need to sit down and tell us everything for the record. Don't you think that my husband is sober? The woman said with a guilty tone. He just had a little in the morning, but it's not much for him. When I heard about what happened here, I rushed over here. These things happen nowadays. It's beyond comprehension. Yes, well, we're very grateful for your responsibility, Cooper said. Well, let's hear from your husband. So, Mr. Hoggins, please sit down and tell us under what circumstances you saw the man who is now before you. Well, it was like this, the witness began. On the 10th, I was walking home from a friend's place. I had a few drinks. I don't have a car, and it was late. About 10 kilometers to walk. If you go through the woods, you can cut off about 4 kilometers. I know every path in these parts, so I went that way. And then, I hear what sounds like a car coming from behind, and then I see headlights. But what's a car doing deep in the woods at that time and in that weather, huh? A puzzle. So I hid so they wouldn't see me. What kind of car can you describe it? The investigator asked. White. At these words, Melvin even jumped in his chair. All right, carry on, nodded Cooper. So, a car stopped nearby, 2 men jumped out, opened the back seat, dragged this man out. He pointed at Melvin, put him behind the wheel, and drove off. What did you do next? The investigator asked. Well, what could I do? I sensed something strange was happening, the witness said. I opened the car, felt the guy, seemed like he was breathing. Then I noticed blood in his hair, found a rag in the car, tied it around his head. But what was I supposed to do next? I couldn't carry him myself, didn't have a phone. Went home, Told my wife everything. She went straight to the police. I fell asleep right away. But when I woke up, I heard they found the guy. And here he is sitting in front of me. All right, can you describe the two men who were in the car and who ran away? Cooper sighed and rubbed his forehead. It was hard to see from there. Both seemed average, nothing special. I have a bad memory for faces, you know. Mr. Higgins shrugged. But I remember one with a scar all over his face. A face with a scar, huh? Cooper summarized. We'll mark that. Now, on to an unpleasant moment. He pulled out some photos from a folder. Both you, Higgins, and you, Melvin, will have to look at these photos. Do you recognize this person, or perhaps saw him that day? The young man's face in the photo was covered in blood, but his features were still discernible. However, Melvin had never seen him before. Oh, God, grimaced Mr. Higgins. No, I don't think No, didn't see him, definitely didn't. I don't recognize him either, replied Melvin. Who is he? You see, on that day, the body of this man was found on the highway. He crashed on a motorcycle, Cooper said. Initially, we didn't connect this incident with your case. However, during the investigation of his personal belongings, we found Rebecca Stewart's car number in his phone notes. Understand? Melvin began rubbing his temples with his fingers, squinting. As soon as this knot began to unravel, new circumstances and complications emerged. The investigator asked Mr. Higgins a few more questions and then released them. There was no reason to detain Melvin any longer. He was apologized to and allowed to go home. Being in the empty apartment was unbearable. The half-drunk coffee in the cup, which Rebecca left before leaving on the table, dried up and turned into brown flakes. Her clothes were scattered everywhere. On the bedside table, there was an open jar of cream and a book with a bookmark. The house smelled like Rebecca. It seemed she would walk into the room any moment. He would give anything for it to happen right now. He didn't want to rearrange her things and disrupt this familiar harmony. Without undressing, the man lay down on the couch, trying to cope with the pain that was tearing him apart from the inside and not letting him breathe. However, he had no time for reflection. He needed to get down to business. First, Melvin decided to call work and arrange for a flexible schedule. "Ah, finally found you," said his boss instead of a greeting. "Well, you're aware of the situation, right?" replied Melvin. "Yeah, I know," grumbled the boss. "But you could have at least warned that you'd be absent. It's not right to find out about your employees from the news." "Look, first, I was lying in the woods with a head injury, then in the hospital, then in jail," Melvin reminded him. "In which of these places do you think it was convenient for me to call you?" "All right, don't get snappy," the man sharply replied. 12 orders. 12, Melvin. Lost because of you. Maybe you won't come back at all. You need recovery now, right? To some resort or something?" "Yeah, you're right, I'm going to a resort. Good luck with your business," replied Melvin and pressed the end call button. Well, there he was, out of a job. Finding a new one wasn't a problem, considering his qualifications and experience. But it also required time, which Melvin unfortunately didn't have. He replayed all the events of the past few weeks in his mind. In fact, nothing particularly unusual or strange had happened, although Rebecca was actually preoccupied with something and behaved differently than usual. Melvin suddenly caught himself thinking. He only knew what his beloved told him. Over the years, Rebecca had grown accustomed to solving all her problems independently and didn't see the need to share many things. What if she had debts, for example? Or even more serious problems that Melvin couldn't solve and didn't know about? Rebecca wasn't one to complain, but now Melvin needed to understand what had really happened in her life. And first of all, he needed to find out how things were going at Rebecca's work. Melvin had been to the workshop several times before and always marveled at how tastefully and lovingly Rebecca could arrange even a simple technical space. Massive work tables, stylish posters on the walls, interesting accessories. Everything was impeccable. Rebecca came here every day. She would wear a uniform of a tender pink color and an apron with leather straps and the bakery's logo. Such attire was worn by every member of her team. Rebecca called it part of the corporate culture. She would discuss order concepts with her assistants, oversee the baking process, talk about new items, and sometimes even personally create intricate cake decorations with them. She also frequented the cafes herself, occasionally taking orders from customers. but it was Rebecca's bakery workshop that she considered the heart of her business. Melvin didn't know why he was going there. Sure, all the workshop employees knew him personally, but how could they help him? Yet, he understood that every detail mattered in this matter. Despite the absence of the owner, work was in full swing. Melvin entered the room, but he wasn't noticed right away. Each of the workers was focused on her task. A multi-tiered wedding cake occupied the central table. 3 girls worked around it, oblivious to everything else. And suddenly, for a split second, Melvin thought he saw Rebecca among them. There she was. Of course, he couldn't be mistaken. Hair pulled back in a bun, covered with a pink kerchief, and the apron. Melvin even rubbed his eyes to make sure it wasn't a vision. "Oh, who's come to visit us?" said the girl, whom Melvin mistook for his fiancée, with a sweet smile. "Hello, Melvin. It's so unexpected to see you here." It was Edith, Rebecca's deputy. For several years now, she had been ensuring the smooth operation of the workshop and was Rebecca's main ideological colleague. Melvin had crossed paths with Edith before, but their communication was limited to polite greetings. Edith approached him, and Melvin again felt an uncomfortable, suffocating sensation. She was indeed wearing Rebecca's apron, with a badge bearing the company's logo in signature font, Rebecca Stewart, Chief. "Hi, Edith," Melvin replied sadly. "It's unusual to see you here." Edith trailed off, noticing his gaze and blushing immediately. "Oh, my apron is just in the wash. I got strawberry syrup on it yesterday." She began to justify herself. "So, any news?" "Not yet," the man replied in a muffled voice, noticing that all the other girls in the workshop were looking at them strangely. "I wanted to know if you had any information. Rebecca was here that day, right?" "Yes, of course she was here, but everything was as usual. The only thing, we had an incident with the cake for the children's party that day. But I've already sorted it all out," Edith proudly replied. "And how did you sort it out?" Melvin wondered. "Rebecca said the kids got sick, and it could almost lead to her business being shut down. But I have my methods," the girl smiled. "Mabel, the junior pastry chef, messed up. She used the wrong cream. There are subtle technological nuances there. I handled it with the parents of the children. I fired Mabel, of course, dealt with the inspectors. As I said, I have my methods." "How could you fire someone without Rebecca?" Melvin asked. "Listen, Melvin," Edith replied irritably. "I understand that you're her future husband and you're worried about her and her business. But let's be honest. You don't understand anything about these matters. While Rebecca is away, I'm her deputy, and I make decisions. You'd better say thank you that I resolved this situation." "Well, yes, of course, thank you," Melvin said. "Actually, I don't know what happened and what to do next. We're all worried and hope that Rebecca will be found, and nothing bad happened to her," Edith replied. "What you can be sure of is that in her absence, Magnolia will continue to operate smoothly under my leadership." Melvin said goodbye to the girl and headed towards the exit. Almost simultaneously, one of the workshop workers came out into the corridor, carrying empty boxes to the garbage containers. "Let me help you," Melvin offered, taking half of the boxes from her hands. "Thank you," she replied quietly. "You're a good person, it's obvious, just don't disappear. And keep an eye on Edith. She didn't spill syrup on her apron. She's been wearing Rebecca's uniform for a week, and when someone comes here, she introduces herself as the director of the bakery." There it was, the first inconsistency already arising. He would need to find out who this Edith was and why she felt the need to lie to Melvin. She was behaving too boldly and confidently, whereas before she had been quiet, following Rebecca's lead. Melvin visited all the coffee shops. The staff at each coffee shop looked at him hopefully. Bombarded with questions after reading the news, even the waitresses and security guards were coming up with conspiracy theories. Late in the evening, Melvin was already drifting off to sleep when he was awakened by a phone call. It was Maria Evans, Rebecca's friend. They had been friends since college, and she would never call him just like that. Melvin had a bad feeling in his chest. "Melvin, I'm sorry for waking you up. I probably didn't I?" From Maria's voice, it was obvious that something was wrong. "It's okay, I'm listening," the man replied. "Something happened and I'm scared. Very scared," Maria said quietly. "I don't know where to start, but it's about Rebecca. she suddenly whispered. I'm afraid to talk about it over the phone, Melvin. Only in person. Okay, I'll come over right away. Maria took a while to open the door. Melvin called the apartment several times and heard the creak of floorboards. The homeowner approached the door and looked through the peephole. Maria, it's me. Everything's okay. The woman cracked open the door, holding it on the chain, and peeked into the hallway. After making sure that Melvin was the only one there, she let him into the apartment. Melvin, I don't know what's happening. This is the first time in my life, she whispered. I've lived honestly all my life. Never broken the law. Never argued with anyone. I've never had enemies. Okay, hold on. Let's calm down and you can tell me everything step by step, Melvin replied. All right, I'll make us some tea now. We'll sit down calmly, and I'll tell you everything. I baked a blackcurrant pie yesterday. Would you like some? Maria asked. I won't say no, Melvin sadly smiled. I've actually been missing homemade baking lately. By the way, it's according to Rebecca's recipe. It turns out it's not that difficult once you learn, Maria replied. They sat down at the table. Maria brought the tea and laid out on plates a soft, juicy pie, which turned out to be incredibly delicious. Great, said Melvin. I tried, she replied, but I'm afraid that's the only good thing I have for today, Melvin. In short, something strange is happening. Come on, spill the beans, don't keep me waiting, impatiently said the man. A few days ago, I noticed that I was being followed, Maria began, and I'm not paranoid. I usually don't notice anyone around at all, but this same guy kept popping up in front of me several times over the week. Nothing remarkable about him. Short hair, not tall, he was wearing a tracksuit. The other day I went to Rebecca's workshop to pick up some pastries. I go out and I see him again near the entrance, can you imagine? And the day before yesterday I was at Magnolia, the one downtown, and I saw him, again him. I couldn't even tell if he came later or was already there. Anyway, he sat at the next table, staring at me. You know, he has such a scary scar on his face, raised red. I was horrified. How could something like that happen? You know, what's left on his face? Melvin felt his fingers starting to grow cold. The scarred face appeared again, and that clearly didn't bode well. So what happened next, Maria? Yesterday I came home, looked at the landing between the stairwells, and there he was again. I don't even remember how I flew into the apartment, Maria replied. So he was just standing there and didn't say anything to you? Melvin asked her. No, he didn't say anything, but it was still creepy, she nodded. Tell me, why would someone just stand in the hallway like that? And the fact that I've seen him more than once, and he knows about it. Knows that I see him? Notice him? Well, yeah, I agree, Melvin nodded. It can't be a coincidence, especially seeing a scarred person and a witness who found me in the woods. Seriously? Maria's eyes filled with horror. God, why did you tell me this? It's going to be even scarier now, especially since I haven't told you everything. So tell me quickly. Melvin shuddered in surprise. Today I got this message from an unknown number. She handed Melvin the phone. We all see and know. Think about how to get back what your friend appropriated. If you go to the police, blame yourself. The detective story is getting more tangled, said Melvin. I suppose they're talking about Rebecca, right? I guess so, Maria nodded. After all, I don't have any other friends. So what could she have stolen? I have no idea. She always had money, but she earned it herself, and in significant amounts. Why would she need to steal anything? Honestly, I don't understand. At all. Well, we definitely need to go to the police about this. Melvin looked intently at the apartment owner. Melvin, I'm not going to the police. Understand, we're dealing with criminals. You got attacked, Rebecca got kidnapped. This isn't petty vandalism. I'm scared, Melvin. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not leaving the apartment. What, are you planning to stay home indefinitely? Yes, she replied confidently. The kids are on vacation, I'm on leave, the fridge is stocked. I'll stay as long as it takes. If they need something, they'll surely start acting. But they're not going to storm my apartment, are they? Okay, hold on, fear is speaking in you, not common sense, Melvin tried to reassure her. Let's think about what we have in the end. We get trapped on the road, I get knocked out, Rebecca disappears. I'm found in a completely different place. A witness says he saw me being put in the driver's seat. 2 people. One of them has a scar on his face. Then, on the same day, a biker dies on the road with a note. A note with Rebecca's car plate number. Then that scar-faced guy starts stalking you and sends a message. Yes, that's all, she nodded. But these facts might not all be links in the same chain. Honestly, I'm starting to lose understanding altogether. Yeah, thanks to you, Maria. How much you've helped me, Melvin sighed. In the end, even more questions. Wait, you said you saw that guy at Magnolia, and he was already there when you arrived, right? Yes, exactly how it seemed to me. I sat down at a table and placed an order, and I saw him sitting across from me with a cup and a plate of leftovers on his table. Yes, he definitely got there before me. Maria, I was in the workshop the other day, and many things seem strange there too, you know? What exactly? Well, for example, how Rebecca's deputy, this Edith, behaves, he said. She walks around there like the rightful owner, wearing Rebecca's uniform with her badge. One of their workers confirmed this after I left the workshop. I wonder, should I tell you about this or not? Maria exclaimed. Have you seen their social media? Melvin, it's Edith. She's everywhere in every photo. She's just filled it with her pictures. You remember, right? And next week there's a celebration for Magnolia's 10-year anniversary. Rebecca gave me an invitation a month ago. And as I understand it, no one plans to cancel this event, despite the disappearance of the Magnolia owner. And they say Edith takes cash orders without running them through the register. This new information needed to be processed. Indeed, Edith seemed too pleased with herself to Melvin. Her remarks about Rebecca's disappearance seemed merely polite. In reality, it felt like this enterprising lady was benefiting from the situation. It was quite obvious she was trying on the role of the owner, and she was doing it with undisguised pleasure. Maria, remind me, when is the celebration? Melvin asked. I've been aware of some organizational aspects, of course, but… Next Friday at 7 in the evening, she said. And you have an invitation for 2? I suggest you take me as your companion. I really want to see this Edith one more time. Of course, let's go, Maria nodded. I wouldn't have gone alone considering, well, all these circumstances. Rebecca was so looking forward to this day, Melvin added sadly. I've decided to start searching for her, on my own for now, but if there are no results in the coming days, I'll turn to a private detective. We need to find money for that. I don't believe in the promptness of our police. You're such a hero, Melvin. Maria looked at him admirably. I don't even want to think that something happened to her. Please, figure it all out, Melvin, whatever it takes, and I'll accompany you everywhere. Let's see who's been following us. Although honestly, I'm scared. What if it's dangerous? Understand, if he wanted to do something to you, he wouldn't have shown his conspicuous scarred face, Melvin replied. They just wanted to scare you. If Rebecca really owes something to someone, it would be logical for them to approach me, so let's draw these people's attention to me, and you'll help me. Okay, I trust you completely, Maria nodded. Great, let's stick to the plan in the morning, said Melvin. Oh, I should go. Need to get some sleep, at least a little. Been awake for almost 24 hours. So why don't you stay here? I'll make the sofa for you, Maria suggested. It's an hour's drive home, then another hour back in the morning, and there won't be any time left for sleep. Well, if you don't mind, I'd be grateful, the man rejoiced. Honestly, I'm falling apart, and my eyes are already closing. In the morning, Melvin woke up to the aroma of coffee and the clinking of dishes coming from the kitchen. He opened his eyes, glanced at his phone, and realized he had slept for almost 9 hours. That was a real record for him, considering that in the past few days he had only managed to sleep in fragments. The long, deep sleep had a truly therapeutic effect. Suddenly, Melvin realized he was on the right track. He had no resources to search for Rebecca except his own wit. It was obvious that some sophisticated puppeteer was behind all this. Understanding the purpose behind it all was the key to solving the mystery. For example, Edith might have benefited from Rebecca's disappearance, but she probably couldn't have pulled off such a complex criminal plan, although that couldn't be entirely ruled out. Now, Edith had complete control over the bakery's finances. She probably had access to the bank, and she could do anything she wanted. It was worth checking what rights and status she had in the company. Melvin decided he needed to hire a private detective as soon as possible. And to pay for his services, he would probably have to sell his car. Suddenly, he heard Maria's voice behind him. Good morning. How did you sleep? The man glanced at her standing in the doorway wearing an apron. Great, thank you, the man smiled. I slept like a baby. It's the first time in all these days that I've had a good rest. All right, then get up and let's have breakfast, she replied. I made omelets a while ago and I'm brewing coffee now. As Melvin washed up in the bathroom, he pondered how different the two friends were. Maria's small apartment was impeccably clean. Rebecca always said her friend was an excellent homemaker and relaxed while cleaning. And then there was breakfast. Melvin's fiancée worked her magic in her bakery but hardly cooked at home. Rebecca preferred to have breakfast at her own cafe. She also didn't bother with cleaning. A housekeeper came to her apartment 3 times a week. Rebecca could stroll around the house in a silk robe, chatting on the phone, then drop it in the middle of the room and move on. Sometimes she rushed somewhere, leaving clothes scattered from the closet and a heap of cosmetics on the dressing table. She warned Melvin up front that he shouldn't expect daily 3-course meals. Sometimes she cooked simple dishes, but more often she ordered food delivery. At first, Melvin found it unusual that his woman behaved this way. After years with his ex-wife, he got used to her handling all the household chores without working. Melvin even enjoyed providing for her and coming home to a tidy house where a hot homemade dinner awaited him. Now he understood that all of that didn't matter. He loved Rebecca just the way she was. Maria's omelets turned out to be incredibly delicious. Listen, you're an amazing hostess. Thank you so much for this breakfast. How could your ex, what's his name, Clifton? How could he ever let such a wonderful woman slip away? He cheated on me, Melvin, she replied bitterly. Imagine, all those years together, our children are so lovely. And then he found himself a young bimbo. Just a classic move. Oh, by the way, where are your kids now? I didn't even ask yesterday, Melvin asked, taking a sip of hot coffee. They're at my mother-in-law's. Maria sat across from him, propping her head up with her hand. She's a perfectly reasonable woman, loves her grandchildren. She's ashamed of her son, of course. He completely forgot about the kids. Yeah, I'll never understand that, Melvin sighed. Relationships with women often end, and that's that. But the kids are forever yours. And Rebecca told me you have a daughter in another city. Yeah, her name is Deborah. She's 12 now. My ex-wife moved there, and it seems she doesn't mind me seeing her, but it's quite a journey, Melvin replied sadly. There's also a new stepfather there. My daughter calls him her second dad. I guess he's a decent guy, treats Deborah well, but it still hurts. No kidding, the apartment's host sighed. Men rarely marry women with children. I've been trying to build relationships over these 2 years, but nothing works out. Either they turn out to be unserious, or they run away when they find out I have 2 kids. So maybe it's a good thing they ran away, huh? Why do you need those who see your kids as a problem? Maria paused. Listen, Melvin, could you marry someone who has children, huh? Just imagine if Rebecca had a child. Absolutely, without hesitation, the man replied. I love her, and I would love her children too. Or at least I would do everything to play a positive role in their lives. You're a rare and dying breed of men, Maria laughed. Rebecca was lucky to have you. She was truly happy, Melvin. Was? He looked at her. Oh, sorry, I misspoke, she said. I worry about her too, and I miss Rebecca a lot. You've been together for less than a year, but we've been friends since college. It's been 20 years already, by the way. Yeah, and I hope your friendship lasts even longer, Melvin smiled. Maria, I think it's time for us to get going. They stepped out of the entrance and got into Melvin's car. There was no one suspicious in the courtyard. He doesn't usually show up this early, Maria said. He already knows all the places I go, and he doesn't follow me directly. He just appears in front of me like a genie out of a bottle. Well, we'll wait for that magical moment, said Melvin. It was cloudy and raining already in the morning. You know, I feel sort of calm with you, but also scared at the same time, Maria said. Scared because it's unclear what's happening. How do you manage to keep your composure? I don't understand. I have no other choice. Since someone has declared war against Rebecca, let them come at me, Melvin replied. Throughout the whole day, Maria didn't catch sight of the mysterious scar-faced individual, despite both of them discreetly scanning everyone who came into their view. The same was true for the next day, and the day after that. Well, I guess I managed to scare off your stalker after all, Melvin said. In that case, there's no point in keeping watch on him. I want to go away for a few days and visit my mother-in-law in the countryside. I haven't seen the kids in 2 weeks, Maria said. I'll come back right in time for the Magnolia anniversary. I need to leave unnoticed. I don't think this person will be able to track me down. Melvin agreed. The stalker wasn't actively following Maria, just popping up in the right places to instill fear. That seemed to be his goal. The X day arrived. Without Rebecca, the celebration seemed pointless. Melvin knew that the employees of Magnolia had debated for a long time whether it was appropriate to celebrate the company's anniversary without the owner. In the end, everyone agreed that firstly, it was very important to hold the event for Rebecca, and secondly, many prestigious fashion houses or upscale restaurants continue to operate and celebrate their birthdays without their creators. Such a parallel seemed quite convincing to everyone, and the anniversary was decided not to be canceled. Melvin pulled up to pick up Maria. She emerged from the entrance in full regalia. Evening dress, high-heeled shoes, beautifully styled hair. In her hands, she held a bouquet of cream roses. Melvin raised an eyebrow, unable to say anything. Have you lost the gift of speech because of my beauty? Maria winked at him. Well, basically, yes. I'm seeing you in this attire for the first time. He looked her over once more. But why the flowers? Who are you planning to give them to? I just thought, Maria hesitated. You see, not much happens in my life. It's just home and work day in and day out, so I've been looking forward to Rebecca's celebration almost as much as she has. That's why I'm all dolled up bringing flowers to the event, planning to take photos there. And I didn't want to deviate from the script. I'll just ask to put the flowers in a vase, Maria added sadly. I think Rebecca would appreciate it. And here she was talking again as if her friend were no longer alive. Phrases in such wording are usually used in reference to those who are no longer with us. She would be appreciated. She would be happy. We will celebrate instead of her. Melvin involuntarily pondered. Would Rebecca be pleased to know that everyone is having fun here while she's somewhere unknown? For him, there was nothing joyful about this celebration. Without his beloved woman, absolutely nothing. He came here to observe. His hunches and suspicions were confirmed. Edith was the center of attention and carried herself like the queen of the evening. She walked around the hall in a long evening gown with a glass of champagne in hand, occasionally stopping by guests. A socialite, no less. It was precisely in this role that Rebecca looked so natural, and Edith against her backdrop seemed like a clumsy teenage girl who secretly put on her mom's dress and heels and risked falling at any moment. However, the girl probably didn't think the same. She definitely enjoyed everything that was happening, but if Rebecca were here, Edith would have stayed in the background, not in the spotlight. This Edith had quickly assumed the role of the hostess. Melvin wanted to get to the bottom of this. However, he didn't rush to avoid scaring anyone off. He had to act blindly. Melvin didn't even know exactly who he was fighting against. It was all based on his suspicions and assumptions. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention? Edith's voice rang out. She ascended to the makeshift stage with a microphone in hand, intending to deliver a speech. I thank you all for coming to our event today. She delivered her prepared speech clearly, slightly squinting from the spotlights directed at her. The story of Magnolia began over 15 years ago, in a small kitchen with simple homemade cakes. They were bought without any advertising. People just told each other about the incredibly delicious pastries. And today, Magnolia is a real bakery empire. Without exaggeration, we are the best in our city. And do you know the secret of our success, friends? It's that all our products are made with love for you, our dear guests. We anticipate the pleasure you get from trying our desserts and visiting our bakeries. We hear your enthusiastic reviews, and it inspires us to create, to innovate, and to make our work even better. Thank you for being with us all these years. Melvin listened to Edith with a pounding heart, hoping that at least one word about Rebecca would be mentioned in her speech. But alas, the fake mistress of Magnolia didn't mention the true queen. Melvin couldn't forgive her for this anymore. When Edith stepped down from the stage, he grabbed her hand in the aisle. What's the matter? She asked indignantly. Are you drunk? I'm completely sober, Melvin replied firmly. I have only one question. Was there really no place in your solemn speech for Rebecca Stewart, the main person in this empire? We are here to celebrate the company's anniversary, not Rebecca's birthday, Edith said. That's exactly it, the company she created, Melvin retorted. To which she devotes herself entirely, and everything around exists only because of her. Believe me, I know how much Rebecca works. I see it from the inside. But as soon as she disappeared for a while, you immediately seem to take her place, and you feel very comfortable in it. Aha, so that's the issue, she laughed. Listen, Melvin, I don't know what nonsense you've come up with there. Have you ever thought about how your fiancé's business operates? No? Tell me, Melvin replied contemptuously. Fine, I will. I won't regret my time on this, the woman said arrogantly. When Rebecca disappeared and you were at the police station, a nightmare began here. People didn't understand how to continue working. Within 2 days, we ran out of finished products, and half of the ingredients were missing, Melvin. Suppliers, clients, warehouse, production, advertising. Rebecca handled all of this. For the first day, all I did was cry and wait for any information. And then, Melvin, I realized that I had to take matters into my own hands. I have a disabled son. I can't afford to lose my job. I used to be Rebecca's deputy, and now I'm fully engaged in the work. And you can't imagine how hard it is for me. It's very difficult to carry everything on my shoulders and still smile. But as you can see, we're operating as usual. The revenue is good. And what about you taking cash orders and pocketing the money? Melvin still didn't believe Edith. What nonsense is this? She laughed. Tanya probably told you, right? Poor jealous woman who always aimed for that position. But Rebecca chose me. Does the picture become clearer to you now, Melvin? Edith, I won't jump to conclusions, but you must understand, the situation is highly charged. I'll be very glad if everything is exactly as you say. In the next minute, the guest distracted Edith. She politely bid farewell to Melvin and wished him a good evening. Good evening sounded like a mockery. Everything happening now reminded Melvin of a feast during a plague. Yes, most guests were aware of what happened to Rebecca, but hardly anyone was deeply touched by it. What had occurred became just another topic for endless discussions, as such an event was extraordinary in their small town. It wasn't just a mundane crime. It was a whole detective series that could be lively debated. Only for Melvin, Rebecca's disappearance was a huge personal tragedy, and he wanted to do everything possible to find his fiancée. At this celebration, he chose the role of an observer. Maria hardly left Melvin's side, only occasionally distracted by memories or inconsequential conversations. But it didn't bother him. At least this way, he didn't arouse any suspicions. Melvin watched the guests, realizing he didn't know half of them, while Rebecca knew absolutely everyone. After all, the invitations were personalized. What secrets could his fiancée be hiding? Perhaps he himself was just a pawn in someone else's game. Melvin? Maria interrupted his thoughts. The man with the scar, he's here, and he was talking to Edith. Where? Melvin asked, looking around. They were just talking in the hallway, and he left, she replied. Melvin dashed into the hallway, ignoring the surprised looks of the guests. There was no one there. Opening the door, he noticed a retreating figure. The man was too far away, but it was worth a try, and Melvin ran after him. The man glanced back, noticed his pursuer, and started to run. The distance between them shortened. Reaching the bus stop, the stranger jumped onto a bus whose doors were almost closed. For a moment, Melvin ran straight down the road after the bus, which was moving too fast. Yet he managed to see the man standing inside the bus, grinning broadly. The smile resembled a grotesque grimace due to the huge scar crossing his face from temple to chin. Catching his breath, Melvin returned to Magnolia. Maria was waiting for him outside at the entrance, peering into the darkness. Thank goodness, she exclaimed upon seeing Melvin. A little longer and I would have called the police. Why did you chase after him? It's so dangerous. And how else was I supposed to find out what he wanted? Melvin said, frustrated. I'm really angry. I was just a step away from him. And what would you have said to him if you caught him? Maria asked. I would have figured it out, Melvin replied. but the fact that he ran away speaks against him, you know. Melvin decided to head home, since there was no point in staying at the party any longer. Then he thought it would be worth talking to Edith again and asking her about the man with the scar on his face. He found Edith and asked the question directly. "Listen, Melvin," the woman replied irritably. "Are you paranoid or did you get drunk again? You're not the first time seems to be covertly accusing me of something. In this case, I'm just curious about what you were talking about 20 minutes ago with the man with the large scar on his face. People saw you with him," Melvin firmly replied. "I didn't talk to any man with a scar. You must have imagined it," Edith loudly retorted. "Stop following and suspecting me." Without giving the man a chance to respond, Edith turned and walked away. The next morning, Melvin and Maria went to the investigator and told him about the strange man. "Why didn't you speak up earlier, Melvin?" Cooper exclaimed. "You should have reported it instead of handling it yourself." "I only saw him for the first time yesterday, and Maria was afraid to approach the police," Melvin justified. "You're receiving direct threats and you're hiding this?" Cooper replied. "Okay, we'll make a composite sketch of this person and start searching." Despite the investigators' assurance of the police's efficiency, Melvin understood that things were moving too slowly. Besides endless testimonies, nothing was happening. The operational measures were completed, and now the investigation was underway. No one seemed to be in a hurry, as if everyone had forgotten about Rebecca. Melvin decided to take matters into his own hands and hire a private detective. He called his army buddy, who worked in law enforcement. His friend recommended a trusted detective to him. Melvin got in touch with him, discussing the nature of the work and, of course, the fee. He didn't have that kind of money on hand. There was no time to hesitate. He urgently needed to sell his car, Melvin's only possession. He listed it at the average market price and marked it as a quick sale. A buyer was found quickly. He arrived in a Mercedes. A burly man in his 60s stepped out of the car, followed by a skinny guy in dark sunglasses. The man carefully inspected the car. Then he got into the driver's seat, started the engine, and began pressing buttons on the panel. Finally, he turned off the engine and got out of the car. "Listen, we need to check again to make sure everything is okay. Everything looks good, but I have a feeling that everything will be fine," he said. "Yes, you can trust me," Melvin smiled. "I work as a mechanic, so I keep my car in good condition, believe me." Then why are you selling it?" the man asked. "You see, I urgently need money and my fiancée disappeared," Melvin replied. "Wait," the buyer squinted. "Isn't the owner of the bakery?" "Yes, that's her." Melvin nodded. "How do you know?" "Who doesn't know? It's such a loud story." The man shrugged. "I read about it on the internet. Your photo was there." "Yes, that's correct. They tried to pin it on me," Melvin said. "But it didn't work out. Now I've decided to take matters into my own hands and search for her." "I see you're a good lad," the man patted him on the shoulder. "I'll buy your car since you need the money for such a noble cause. By the way, my name is Felix Neal." "Felix, nice to meet you. And why do you need such a car if it's not a secret?" Melvin asked. "Even though it's in excellent condition, it's unlikely to compete with a Mercedes." "I'm getting it for my son, Bill," the man nodded towards the guy. "He's a latecomer in our family, and his mom spoiled him. We gave him a Lexus for his 18th birthday, and he crashed it within a month. So I said after that, we're getting you the simplest car. If you manage to drive it for a year without incident, then we'll think about a new one." Even during his college years, Melvin started working at an auto repair shop. There, he became a real pro. After a year of work, he saved up for his first car, into which he invested more effort and money in repairs than the car initially cost. "Do you know your way around Mercedes?" Felix asked. "Any issues with yours?" Melvin nodded towards Felix's Mercedes. "No, this one's new." Felix shook his head. "But my wife's car has some strange knocking noise. Could you take a look?" "Yeah, I can take a look," Melvin agreed. "But I'm not working temporarily right now. I quit." "No problem. You can just come over and check it out," Felix offered. The deal was made. Melvin held a hefty stack of cash in his hands. Money is so relative, the same amount, but it offers so many possibilities. You can buy a used car or a few weeks of a specialist's work, and you can even buy hope for the salvation of your beloved woman. In those days, Melvin keenly felt the lack of finances and realized how cheaply his work time was valued compared to that of a private detective. What he earned in 2 weeks would have to be paid to the detective for just 1 day. Melvin understood that these events were given to him not only to find his beloved Rebecca, but also to start changing his life. He called the private detective and set up a meeting for Monday. According to Melvin's calculations, the entire sum would last less than a month, and he sincerely hoped to get some result during that time. But for now, he needed to think about his future. Melvin's plan was clear. He would start by estimating the budget for opening his own workshop, then find a suitable location, and finally apply for loans. Melvin had an impeccable credit history. Thoughts of opening his own auto service distracted him from his worries. Melvin imagined how proud Rebecca would be of him, and it was bound to happen. It couldn't be otherwise. The next day, Melvin had a trip scheduled to Felix's house where he needed to inspect his wife's car, and there was his first client. The door was opened by a well-groomed woman in her 50s wearing a silk trouser suit. "You must be Melvin," she smiled. "I'm Frances. Felix warned me that you'd be coming. I hope you can fix my car." Felix Neal's country house was situated on a vast estate, and even the garage where the car was located was larger in size than the apartment Melvin had rented before. Inside, there were several expensive cars, including the one that had belonged to Melvin just a few days ago. Bill was hovering around the car, wiping the windows, and didn't look as gloomy as he did on the day of purchase. Apparently, the guy finally understood. It was better than nothing. "Bill, where are you going?" Frances asked. "I'm going to pick up Angela. I'll take her from her manicure appointment and then we'll go somewhere," Bill replied to his mother. "He's got a nice girl," she whispered to Melvin, "but it seems like she doesn't like that Bill doesn't have a Lexus now, just this old car. But I think the father did the right thing buying a car from you for his son." Frances led him to her Mercedes. "Here's my car, listen," she said, starting the engine. "Here, Melvin, do you hear it? Do you hear this strange noise? It's like a little imp has settled in there and is groaning." "Well, I'll try to find this little imp for you," Melvin smiled. "All right, then I'll leave you to it and you can come inside when you're done," she replied and left. The job took no more than 15 minutes. Melvin had dealt with similar breakdowns before. Despite not often having cars of this level in his hands, he managed it. He found the necessary part online and went to Frances to report the result. The woman was sitting in an armchair, sipping tea with her legs up on a footstool. "So quickly?" she exclaimed, surprised. "Or did you not find anything?" "On the contrary, everything is clear to me," Melvin replied. "Here, take a look. You'll need to purchase this, and next time I'll definitely fix the problem." "Don't even bother showing me anything. I barely understand anything," Frances said. "Felix left you money for diagnostics on that sideboard by the entrance. Send him the photo, please. Would you like some tea?" "No, thank you," Melvin replied. The amount Felix left him was twice as much as what he used to charge for his services while working in the workshop. After saying goodbye to Frances, Melvin headed for the exit. Melvin was almost out of the house's territory when he suddenly heard Bill's voice from the backyard. "Can I have a moment of your time?" the guy whispered, peeking out from around the corner. Melvin turned around and walked toward Bill. "What's with the secrecy?" Melvin chuckled. "It's like this." Bill hesitated. "Could you quickly teach me how to drive stick? I need to go to my girlfriend's, but I don't know how." "I don't understand," Melvin said, surprised. "How did you get your license and then drive your Lexus?" "Well, I can drive in general," the guy grinned awkwardly, "but I bought the license. I was too lazy to take the test myself. But if my dad finds out about it, he'll kill me. I never thought I'd have to drive stick, did I?" "You're something, Melvin." Melvin shook his head reproachfully. "Just show me a couple of moves, like how to work the clutch and all that. I'm not stupid, I'll learn," Bill pleaded. "Just if Dad sees the car in the garage and I'm suddenly taking a taxi, he'll think I'm drunk and start grilling me." Melvin realized that it was better to spend a couple of hours teaching Felix, but at least he would somewhat protect other road users from accidents. "Thank you for agreeing," Bill nodded gratefully, "and thanks for not commenting." They quickly pulled out of the garage, and for a moment, Melvin felt a painful pang in his chest. After all, he cherished this car. Melvin moved to the passenger seat and began explaining to Bill how to start, how to shift gears. The guy turned out to be quite sharp. "Ah, it's not that hard, well done," Melvin said. "I told you I'm clever." Bill smiled at the man's praise. Just yesterday, Melvin would have condemned this guy's philosophy, who hadn't earned anything in life yet, but was already used to paying with daddy's money. But now Melvin understood how much having money could help him. What would he do now if he didn't have a car? At the beginning of their relationship, he didn't understand how a wealthy businesswoman like Rebecca could even pay attention to Melvin, a simple mechanic without his own car, especially after her previous wealthy and influential boyfriend. Melvin thought that women chose based on different principles. When Melvin got to know Rebecca better, it became clear that the material side was not a priority for her. She said she always wanted to find someone with whom she felt equally comfortable talking and being silent. At the same time, Melvin realized that he wanted to meet all her criteria, to become Rebecca's support, to give her gifts, to fulfill any of her desires. Once again, he returned to thoughts about his auto repair shop. Melvin had plenty of experience. Over the years, he had learned everything about this business. Immersed in his plans, Melvin didn't notice as they drove into the city center. "So, what do you think? Am I driving okay? Can I go onto the highway alone?" Bill asked. "Well, you've got your license, so technically you can," Melvin winked at the guy. "How about we pick up my girlfriend from the nail salon nearby and then I'll drop you off home," Bill suggested. They pulled up to the salon and a few minutes later a petite blonde in tight jeans and a crop top came out. She quickly got into the car, glanced around and said, "Well, Bill, your car isn't that bad. You said it was awful, but it seems pretty decent overall." Melvin thought Bill blushed. "Angela, meet Melvin, the former owner of this car. Melvin, this is my girlfriend, Angela." Bill turned to Melvin, smiling awkwardly. "Hello," the girl nodded. "Nice car you have. Bill, look at the manicure I got." With these words, she held out her hand. Melvin glanced at her fingers and was stunned. On Angela's wrist was Rebecca's gold bracelet with the snake and apples, the very same one. Melvin couldn't be mistaken. "Where did you get this bracelet from?" Melvin exclaimed, grabbing the girl's wrist. The smile instantly vanished from her face, and Bill sharply pushed Melvin's hand away. "What do you think you're doing?" the guy said. "Guys, I'm sorry. This is Rebecca's bracelet, the same woman who disappeared." Bill and Angela exchanged bewildered looks. "Why did you assume it was her bracelet in the first place? Maybe it just looks similar. There's no guarantee it was unique," Bill said, surprised. "It can't be anything else. It's a family heirloom," Melvin stated. The girl looked at Bill suspiciously. "So, Bill gave it to me." "I found it a few days ago, that's all," Bill replied calmly. "What do you mean, found it? Where?" Melvin asked. "On the outskirts of town," Bill began explaining. "We went there with friends, to an empty lot, to do some target shooting. We were walking between the shacks, and I saw something shining in the grass. Thought it was costume jewelry at first, but then I took a closer look. Wanted to sell it, but showed it to a friend who's a jeweler, my grandpa's buddy. He said it's very valuable with real rubies and emeralds. So I decided to give it to Angela. Hope you're not going to scold me for not taking the find to the police, as required by law." "Oh, Bill," Melvin shook his head. "I get the main thing. If you're not scolded, you'll only do good. And now you've given me hope, and for that, I'll be grateful to you for life. Can you show me the place, Bill?" "Sure I can," the guy replied, buoyed by yet another compliment. Apparently, Felix spared no expense for his son, but kind words seemed to be in short supply from the man. "Listen, let me drive and you can guide me," Melvin suggested. "Don't take it personally, Bill. It'll just be faster this way. I'll give you a few lessons in extreme driving and auto repair on the go." "Yeah, no problem," Bill agreed. "I've already maxed out my plan for the day anyway." It was about a half-hour drive to the outskirts. The place was specific. It wasn't safe to be there alone at night. It was even better not to be there at all. The city authorities were gradually demolishing the old shacks, relocating the residents to new homes. The process was slow, so there were still some rough characters living there. Melvin's phone rang. It was Maria. Melvin dismissed the call, not wanting to be distracted while driving, but Maria called again. Melvin returned her call. "Finally, Melvin," Maria answered with relief. Could you come over again today? I have some information about the guy with the scar, and I've prepared dinner. I can't handle it alone. I'll need your help. Oh, Maria, I'd love to, but time is ticking now, you know. It seems I stumbled upon Rebecca's trail, Melvin replied. What? Maria exclaimed. Tell me more, and where are you now? I'm heading to the outskirts of the city. We'll talk about the rest later, he replied briefly. What's the new information you have? Maria inquired. Let's discuss it later, okay? Melvin quickly responded. All right, Melvin, be careful, Maria said before hanging up. On the road, Bill questioned Melvin about all the circumstances surrounding Rebecca's disappearance. Until then, he had only read about the case online, where many facts were exaggerated or misrepresented. Nonetheless, the story still sounded eerie. Angela sat quietly in the back seat, trying not to miss a word. There were hardly any people on the streets at that time. Occasionally, they passed small groups of suspicious-looking teenagers, smoking and giving suspicious looks at passing cars. Angela shivered and discreetly pressed the door lock button from inside. Finally, they reached the outskirts where semi-destroyed shacks stood. Beyond them lay a garbage-strewn wasteland. There was no one around, and only a few windows in the old houses had lights on, reminding them that people still lived in such a dismal place. Do you remember exactly where you found the bracelet? Melvin asked. Of course, the guy replied. There's only one shack still inhabited here, and those two are definitely abandoned. There's a path leading to them. That's where I found it, almost by the entrance. Do you think your fiancé is here? Angela asked. Someone else could have found the bracelet elsewhere and dropped it here. Well, logically, Melvin agreed, but I still feel like we need to search here. Such coincidences don't happen. All right, I'll come with you to inspect the area, Melvin, noticing Bill's eyes gleaming with anticipation. For him, all of this felt like an exciting game, one that Bill would eagerly recount to his friends tomorrow. Guys, I'd prefer if you stayed in the car. I don't want to put you in danger, Melvin replied. I'm a grown, independent man, and I decide for myself whether to put myself in danger or not, Bill confidently replied. Melvin understood that Bill couldn't back down to avoid looking like a weakling or a coward in front of his girlfriend. Well then, let's go, independent man, Melvin chuckled. Don't forget your phone, we might need to use the flashlight. They approached the abandoned shacks, deciding to start with them. In theory, Rebecca could have been in the inhabited house, but getting in there would definitely attract attention. The shack could serve as a perfect setting for a horror movie. Piles of garbage, broken windows with dim moonlight seeping through, illuminating the maze of dilapidated corridors. Melvin confidently led the way, opening doors and illuminating their path with the flashlight on his phone. Bill, it seemed, felt uneasy. Listen, I've only seen these kinds of setups in games, the guy whispered. And you're just strolling around here so calmly, Melvin? What's there to fear? We don't have any weapons, and if someone decides to attack us here, they'd have the upper hand. So let's just keep moving forward. Melvin shook his head to dispel anxious thoughts. All right, looks like nobody's here, judging by everything. Even a layer of dust, no traces at all. Looks like no one's visited this cozy home in ages. All right, then let's go check out the second shack, Bill suggested to Melvin. Melvin squinted until sparks flew in his eyes. They approached the second house and were taken aback. There was a new wooden door with a shiny metal lock at the entrance. Oh, now this is interesting, Melvin muttered, pulling the handle. And look, all the windows are boarded up, Bill added. Clue on the surface? That's exactly what I'm thinking. Listen, Bill, why don't you go around the house and see if there are any other doors or openings? Meanwhile, I'll try to pry open the window. It's just plywood nailed over, Melvin suggested. The guy agreed and disappeared around the corner. Meanwhile, Melvin attempted to peel off the plywood sheet nailed to the weathered window frames. The material yielded easily, and Melvin started pulling harder. Suddenly, he heard muffled thuds and strange shouts. Melvin froze, listening intently, then quickly backtracked, trying to move silently. Looking back, he realized Bill was nowhere to be seen. Surely the guy was trying to climb in through the window on the other side of the house. Turning the corner, Melvin saw a man standing by their car, pounding his fist on the glass and shouting something. Hey, what do you want? Melvin shouted, trying to determine if Angela was still inside the car. As he approached the car, he recognized the man. Scott Powers, Rebecca's ex-boyfriend. the one she broke up with in a loud scandal when she met Melvin. Melvin had only seen the man in photos that Rebecca hadn't had time to throw away. In those pictures, Scott looked more presentable. Now he looked emaciated and oddly dressed. "Oh, here's our hero," Scott shouted, pulling a gun from his waistband. He aimed it at Melvin. "Freesy!" Melvin froze, catching a glimpse of Angela shrinking in fear on the back seat of the car. He needed to act cautiously. What was happening? Bill would show up any minute now, and when he saw this scene and his girlfriend in danger, he wouldn't likely maintain composure and restraint. "I guess we have a familiar car in the neighborhood, huh?" Scott said. "Who are the guests here at this hour? And no wonder I told Rebecca you were a complete idiot. You didn't even bother looking for her. Got yourself some little chick and ride her around in your rusty car, huh? Where's Rebecca, and what do you want?" Melvin spoke firmly and confidently, despite the gun pointed at him. "Why do you need her? Or rather, why does she need you? Fool. Where did you even come from, you poor fool? You switched from your old car to her BMW, huh? Moved into her fancy apartment instead of your dirty flat. Why does she need you?" Scott theatrically spoke. "Do you know I furnished that apartment, you idiot? Gave her flowers by the basket, diamonds, gave her everything. And what could you give her, huh? Ice cream in the park? She's mine, always has been and always will be, got it?" Melvin realized the main thing. Rebecca was alive. This thought uplifted him and filled him with happiness. "Listen, Scott, if you have issues with me, then deal with me," Melvin calmly replied. "I'm standing right in front of you, as you can see. I'm ready to address any of your grievances. Let's step away from the car. Let the girl go and we'll talk man to man." Scott laughed loudly, throwing his head back. "How can I talk man to man with you? You're not a man. You couldn't ensure the safety of your beloved woman. But with me, she was always safe, got it? And this fool too was fooled. Now she's no longer a necessary witness to me, understand? What do you want?" Melvin shuddered with a strange premonition. "We're going for a ride, you, me, and your girl," Scott grinned maliciously. "You'll have a beautiful final walk to places you don't even know about, and no one knows. Now step back a few meters and don't even think of moving. I'll shoot you right away, bastard." Melvin silently took a few steps back, then he stopped. "Hey, you little snot," Scott tapped on the glass. "Open up, move to the front seat. Come on, or I'll shoot you and him too." "Ha ha, how could you fall for this beggar? He's not even fit to be your dad." Angela obediently opened the door and, wiping tears with trembling fingers, sat in the front passenger seat. "Listen, let the girl go," Melvin spoke. "She's got nothing to do with this. What harm has she done to you, huh?" "Yeah, I'll let her go right away," Scott sarcastically replied. "Maybe I should give her the phone so she can call the cops, but it seems it's dead. Everything's in my favor, see? Get behind the wheel, and I'll sit in the back and control your route." Scott waved the gun towards the car, and Melvin headed for the vehicle. Scott opened the rear door, put one foot inside, still keeping Melvin in his sights. Melvin almost got behind the wheel, but at that moment Bill came running around the corner of the house. He leaped onto Scott, knocking him to the ground so abruptly and unexpectedly that Scott didn't even have time to understand what happened. Melvin reacted. Jumping out of the car, he kicked the gun out of Scott's hand, and together with Bill, they subdued the perpetrator, holding him down on the ground. Within a minute, 2 black cars appeared in the distance, speeding towards them. Several men in camouflage uniforms, helmets, and carrying rifles leaped out almost on the move. "As soon as I saw what was happening here, I called my dad," Bill explained. "Wait, what does your dad do?" Melvin asked. "It doesn't matter," the guy smiled. "But it's enough for his men to arrive within minutes, anywhere in the city at the first call." Scott was handcuffed and taken away in the car. Soon, 2 men in bulletproof vests emerged from it, one of whom addressed Melvin. "Melvin Rogers, is that you?" Melvin nodded. "Well, then let's go." The soldier pointed towards the closed barracks. "The detainee, Scott, roughly indicated where he's holding your lady. Seems like she's okay." Bill wanted to go with them, but Angela clung to her boyfriend and asked him to stay with her. "You better call your dad and let him know everything's okay," the second man in uniform grumbled to him. Melvin, along with the 2 soldiers, headed towards the house. Approaching the barracks, one of the men kicked open the flimsy door. Inside, the walls were dilapidated and the windows were broken. At the end of the corridor, they encountered a new metal door with a keypad lock. How are you going to open this one? Melvin asked cautiously. It's just a wooden door on the outside to avoid drawing attention. To open this door, the detainee himself gave us the code. We were very persuasive, one of the soldiers replied. While one of the fighters entered the code, Melvin stood nearby, hearing his heart pounding loudly. Just a few hours ago, he was ready to give everything he had to pay the detective's fee. But at that moment, the chances of success seemed slim. And now, Rebecca was just a few meters away from Melvin, separated only by a door and a few seconds. Behind the door was a staircase leading to the basement. The men quickly descended and entered a tiny room. There was a small table, a sink, a toilet, and an old wooden bed. Rebecca lay curled up on it, not reacting to the people entering. Melvin rushed to his beloved, trying to lift her and hold her close. The woman slowly opened her eyes and looked indifferently at her beloved. "What do you want?" she whispered barely audibly. "We're getting you out of here. The guys must have already called an ambulance, and specialists will arrive here soon," Melvin replied. Melvin lifted Rebecca in his arms. She had always been slender and light, and he enjoyed carrying her, spinning her around until she giggled with joy. Now, she felt weightless. Sunken cheeks, hollow eye sockets, lifeless arms with veins showing through. Melvin's insides twisted at the sight. Most of all, he regretted not being able to properly punch Scott's face. The soldiers were speaking into their radios, but Melvin didn't even try to understand them. He listened to Rebecca's breathing. He carried her as if she were the most precious thing in his life, holding her tightly to his chest. Indeed, there was an ambulance in the yard. 2 women quickly brought out a stretcher, and Melvin laid Rebecca on it. "Can I ride with you?" the man asked hopefully. "No, not yet," the doctor replied sternly. "We've been instructed to take this patient to the central hospital, avoiding all contact." Melvin bid farewell to Bill and Angela, deciding to go to the hospital alone. As he expected, he wasn't allowed into the room. Melvin spent over 2 hours in the waiting area, intending to at least wait for the doctor and find out Rebecca's health status. "I was wondering where the main witness disappeared to," Melvin heard the voice of Officer Cooper, who unexpectedly appeared right in front of him. "They won't let you in?" Melvin wearily shook his head, shaking hands with the detective. "Wait here, I'll sort this out," Cooper said, sitting down beside him. "I'm waiting for approval from higher-ups to see if we can even question the victim." "Are you aware of the circumstances?" Melvin asked. "Well, just in broad strokes for now," Cooper replied. "We questioned Scott, of course, and it seems he's headed straight to the psychiatric ward. I thought he was faking it at first, but I've learned to spot those actors over the years. This one's definitely off his rocker." "So he didn't say anything at all?" Melvin sighed, disappointed. Began the police officer. "He says he deeply loved Rebecca. He was devastated when she left for you, tormented himself. And then he started having visions that he was the god of darkness, and he could do anything, so he began stalking her. And when he found out that you were driving to your parents' place in the village, he set up a trap. He knew Rebecca wouldn't just pass by. They stunned you, transported you to another location while you were approaching the trap, disabled it, loaded you into another car and took you away. Oh wait, the doctor is messaging me. We can go in." Rebecca lay on the hospital bed, curled up, exactly the same posture as when Melvin recently found her in the basement. She opened her eyes and looked at Melvin, who was smiling. "Is Maria okay with your visit to me?" Rebecca asked indifferently. "I don't understand," Melvin frowned. "What does Maria have to do with anything?" "Melvin, listen," the woman slowly spoke, exerting effort. "Scott, despicable as he is, at least opened my eyes to you, to the fact that you're a selfish playboy and womanizer who just used me." "Rebecca, what are you saying?" exclaimed Melvin, trying to take her hand, but she pushed him away. "Notice, I have nothing with me, not a single thing, just the clothes on me. Nothing except this." With these words, the woman leaned forward slightly, pulled out several photos from the back pocket of her jeans, and handed them to Melvin. Him and Maria, in his car, at the Magnolia anniversary, in a cafe. And finally, him and Maria naked on the couch in her apartment, on the very same day he first came to her and stayed overnight. "Just don't tell me it's photoshopped," Rebecca said. Scott showed me videos on his phone and recordings on his dictaphone of you chatting and giggling together with Maria. Why would I then try to find you and rescue you, Rebecca? Asked Melvin. The police were looking for me. You weren't there, Rebecca quietly replied. So just leave now and make sure I never see you again. Keep the photos as a memory. She turned away from him, covering herself with the blanket over her head. Melvin wanted to scream, to hold her in his arms, shake her, and explain that they were both severely manipulated. He reached out towards the blanket, but at that moment Cooper entered the room. Is she asleep? Cooper whispered. Did you talk? Mr. Cooper, can I have a word with you? Melvin nodded towards the corridor and left the room with the investigator. After listening to him, Cooper breathed a sigh of relief. You've just made my job easier, Melvin. I knew Scott wasn't acting alone. Yes, the scar-faced guy, his accomplice, that's clear. Someone was heavily assisting him, providing information. And here you go, Maria Evans. She immediately fell under suspicion with her shady history and stalker. My boss likes to say, it's funny when a fool thinks they're smarter. Well, this is one of those cases. So you're saying Maria was working with him with Scott? Melvin exclaimed in surprise. Of course, replied Cooper. You thought we weren't doing anything, but we've done quite a bit, Melvin. For instance, we checked all the cameras at Maria's entrance, and no man remotely resembling a stalker entered the building on the day you specified. Second point, the Magnolia Bakery, where she supposedly also encountered the stalker. There, the cameras face the opposite direction, towards the warehouses, and again, the same story. A lady arrives in a taxi, rushes into the bakery, then comes out with a box of pastries and leaves in the same taxi. No one around, understand? And only once did our scar-faced guy show up on camera, on the day of the Magnolia anniversary. When you saw him personally, there were no other episodes of stalking. But if Maria lied twice, it means the rest is likely fabricated too. By the way, the person's identity is confirmed. It's Dean Garrett, with 2 prior convictions. We're planning to question Maria. We've invited her for questioning next week, and the nature of the interrogation will be somewhat different this time, understand? Can I ask you for a favor? Asked Melvin. I need to tell Rebecca about this. She won't listen to me right now, but if you tell her that I've been set up, then... Of course, don't worry, agreed Cooper, but let her gather herself first. I need to question her now. As for Scott, of course, it's all clear. Such an obviously absurd plan would hardly occur to a sane person. Remember we mentioned the deceased biker with Rebecca's car plate? Of course, replied Melvin. And has that issue been resolved as well? He was supposed to be Scott's witness, said Cooper. The guy was heavily into drugs, and they tossed him this job. All he had to do was ride a motorcycle to the right place, then confirm that he supposedly saw you loading Rebecca's body into some car, and maybe even take a photo. But that guy was unstable. In the end, he couldn't handle the wet road and crashed. I don't think Scott was capable of murder. He's a coward. He wanted to be a big shot schemer and probably didn't even realize he was committing a crime. When a person is unstable, their actions lack logic. After the incident, Melvin and Rebecca became even closer. He decided not to ask questions, knowing she would tell him everything she deemed necessary. His task now was to heal her wounds. Melvin tried to be there for her as much as he could. Sometimes at night, Rebecca would wake up screaming, clutching onto him, only to fall back asleep immediately. One evening, the doorbell rang. It was Maria, once Rebecca's best friend, the one who effortlessly plotted to ruin several destinies. Hello, Rebecca replied calmly. Come in. She took a few steps back, allowing the woman to enter. Well, it's time to talk, Maria said hoarsely. It was obvious this visit was difficult for her. Sit down then. Speak up. Why did you come here? Rebecca gestured to the armchair for her former friend. I have a lot of questions for you, of course, but I'll listen first. And try not to lie, added Melvin. Keep in mind we already know quite a bit. Maria looked at him strangely, took a deep breath, and began her story. I've always envied you, Rebecca. I'm a grown woman, and only now have I found the strength to admit it to myself. We both started from the same point, but ended up so differently. You have your own business, which you love so much. You're successful. Men. And now, a beloved person. I always thought everything was fine with me too. Family, work, some trips here and there. But then you dropped your history diploma and started doing what you love. And I thought, why did I study for so many years then? I should work in my field. So I went to teach in school. I quickly realized I hated that job, Maria spoke. History itself, the school, and those students. But wait, I don't understand, Maria. Did someone force you to work? What stopped you from leaving and pursuing something else, finding yourself eventually? Rebecca, puzzled. Besides, you didn't even mention that something was bothering you. On the contrary, you always talked about your school with enthusiasm, with a sparkle in your eyes. About dedication, about emotions. Even hinted that in your case it was a calling, unlike my simple business. That's the thing, Maria lowered her gaze. I lied about that too. I pretended everything was fine to keep up with your success. The only thing where I thought I outdid you, Rebecca, was in my personal life. I had a family, children, while you only had admirers, none of whom proposed to you. I wanted you to envy me, so I talked about our family gatherings, some joint trips, holidays. I made up stories about how Clifton would bring me coffee in the mornings, write romantic notes. But none of that was true, Rebecca. I just believed in the fabricated image so much that eventually it started to seem real to me. And you just listened, as if out of respect, without any excitement. You were showered with huge baskets of flowers, jewelry, tickets to the sea, taken to restaurants. And I got a frying pan or a figurine. And when I found out that he had been cheating on me all these years and spending money on his mistresses, that's when my illusion shattered completely. Well, to reassure you a bit, I can say that I regretted not being able to start a family too, Rebecca replied. I can't say I envied you or my other married friends. On the contrary, that kind of family life seemed boring to me. I needed my person, not someone just for the sake of a family, but someone I truly connected with. And until I met Melvin, I hadn't found anyone like that. As a trigger, Maria barely whispered, starting to cry. Wait a second, hold on, said Melvin. I understand now that you tried to use me to turn Rebecca against me. But how could I be the cause of anything when you two had been friends for 20 years, and I showed up less than a year ago? That's the point. As soon as Rebecca told me about you, my first thought was that you were perfect for me, not for her, the woman replied. No offense, Melvin, but Rebecca is on a completely different level. She had admirers who were influential, wealthy. Even Scott, before this whole story, he was magnificent. Everyone admired the couple. And Rebecca herself is quite complex, while you, Melvin, you're simple, and yet genuine. My dad was like that, you're so similar. Okay, but maybe it's not about who's genuine and who's complex, said Rebecca. Maybe it's about you being interested in any man who is around me? I remember you liked Scott too. You admired him more than I did. Isn't that right? Maria remained silent, looking down. All right, we get it. I never suspected that and ended up being the cause of discord myself, said Melvin. What's next? How did you and Scott come up with this plan? He took the breakup with Rebecca very hard, but didn't show it, Maria continued. On the contrary, he acted demonstratively, as if he didn't care about his ex-fiancée. He started partying everywhere, showing up with stunning, model-looking girls. And then he even went abroad. Or pretended to. A couple of months ago, I accidentally ran into him at the supermarket, and he unexpectedly asked me for help. At first, I didn't understand what he meant. We went to a cafe, he ordered wine, we started talking. He began sharing how much he was struggling with the breakup with Rebecca and couldn't come to terms with it. He said he loved her more than life itself, and that if it weren't for this mechanic, they would still be together. So I told him I really liked this mechanic, and that's what Scott seized upon. Maria, oh my goodness, Rebecca covered her face with her hands. Maria, this betrayal from you hurt me much more than Scott's maniacal actions. He's a sick person, and all these years I considered you my sister, and it turns out you were my main enemy, Maria. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, she cried, but still I beg you for forgiveness. I am ready to atone for my guilt for the rest of my life, Rebecca. I need to think about everything, Rebecca replied. But first, you tell me, what happened next? Well, then we met a few more times, the woman continued. I somehow got carried away. We had never talked before, and Scott seemed harsh, brutal to me. But then I saw him from a different angle, saw how strong his torment was. And gradually he began to lead me to the idea that we could resolve this situation so that everyone would be fine in the end. And by everyone, you mean who? Rebecca protested. Well, at that moment, it seemed to me that it was good for all of us. Maria tried to justify herself. He suggested setting up the situation to take you away. Said he would go with you to the mountains. Supposedly, he has a house there, and he would persuade you to come back to him. And my task was to get closer to Melvin. Well, to seduce him. And did you really believe that seeing how much I love Rebecca, I would immediately switch to you? Are you out of your mind? Exclaimed Melvin. Scott convinced me that it was possible, the woman sighed. He gave me a lot of advice on how to do it. Scott turns out to be an excellent manipulator, and I fell for it. Now his plan seems absurd to me, but back then I was inspired by the prospects. So what advice did he give you? Asked Melvin. Well, first ask for help. A man of your type will always come to a woman's aid, she replied. Ah, so this guy with the scar was invented, right? Smirked Melvin. Well, not entirely invented. That's Dean, he worked for Scott. But I did come up with the surveillance. But for authenticity, I asked him to briefly appear at the Magnolia anniversary party, where you almost caught him. Okay, first there was the damsel in distress. Go on, Maria, Melvin urged. Then we had to play on contrast. Domestic comfort, taking care of you, delicious food. Then surprise you again with a stunning appearance, transforming from a housewife into a princess. I did it all like that. But at the same time, I was absolutely sincere towards you, understand, Maria explained. Yes, however, that sincerity didn't stop you from taking various joint photos to show me, Rebecca reminded her. And by the way, how was the photo taken where you two were in the same bed? Well, when Melvin came to me for the first time, I spiked his tea with a sedative. He fell asleep soundly, so I took that photo. In the morning, Melvin even said how well he slept. I did it because Scott wrote to me that everything was going according to plan. Rebecca thawed out and wasn't angry about the abduction, but seemed concerned about Melvin. She felt guilty towards him. So Scott said we needed to speed it up by making these fake photos, Maria detailed. Well, okay, nodded Melvin. Did you not realize that regardless of your intentions, you committed a crime, and you're the main accomplice, Maria? No matter what your intentions were, you kidnapped someone. It was all like a haze, said Maria. I believed him, and I'll repeat, he said that Rebecca was happy with everything. Okay, then I have the next question, said Melvin. Scott told you that he took Rebecca to a cottage in the mountains, but at what point did you realize that wasn't true? Because on that very day when I was going with my acquaintances to where Rebecca actually was, you called and asked where exactly I was going. You called Scott and warned him, am I right? Yes, the woman answered him quietly. He slipped up that they were in the city. I realized he didn't go anywhere into the mountains, but it was already too late. Melvin, you were there every day, and I was so happy even about that. There was nothing between us, but I thought everything was ahead. I prayed that everything would work out for Rebecca with Scott, wherever she was. Okay, I'll refrain from comments. Melvin jumped to his feet. Maria, maybe you need to see a psychiatrist. I'm going to the police now, the woman replied, not raising her eyes. These days I haven't been hiding. I went to my mom's, afraid to come back, afraid to face the harsh reality. But hiding is not a solution for me. The kids are with my ex-husband's mom, but they'll be back soon, and then what? Yes, perhaps that's the right decision, Rebecca said dryly. I just ask you, Rebecca, one last time, don't bury me even deeper. A lot can depend on your testimony, too. Maria looked at Rebecca with pleading eyes. At least for the sake of my children, because they always loved you, and you treated us well. And I'll get my punishment anyway, I'm already getting it. How am I burying you? Rebecca shrugged. I don't even have anger towards you now. Pity maybe, but not anger. I see how tangled you've become living someone else's life. We've had some good times over the years. I'm not sure if we'll keep in touch, but I hope everything turns out well for you and your children in the end. When Maria left, Rebecca locked the door behind her with all the locks and tightly drew all the curtains in the house. In recent days, she had been doing this instinctively, as if trying to protect herself from invisible enemies. She and Melvin understood that the consequences of the nightmare they went through would haunt them both for a long time. Rebecca wanted to undergo therapy with a psychologist, and Melvin had invited a rehabilitation massage specialist to their home. In the days following her release, Rebecca's body felt like stone. She flinched at the slightest touch and slept curled up in a ball, just like on that day. Rebecca needed full recovery, and Melvin wanted to put in maximum effort for that. He tried to be as close to his beloved woman as possible, knowing that Rebecca would continue to experience anxiety and fear for a long time. Life gradually returned to its usual course. Rebecca went back to the workshop, where she was greeted with applause and hugs. She cried, realizing that one unhealthy person had wanted to take away her world, a significant part of which was Magnolia. As it turned out, Edith had indeed brilliantly managed the responsibilities of running the business during Rebecca's absence. The business hadn't suffered any losses. All the accounting was impeccable, and all the orders were fulfilled. Melvin apologized to Edith for suspecting her. "You know, Melvin, in a way you were partly right," Edith replied. "I did want to try out the role of a business owner, and in the first few days I enthusiastically played the game I had invented for myself. It was only after a few days that I realized it wasn't my thing at all. I didn't know how to do what Rebecca did. And I didn't want to take on all the responsibility. Yes, I managed the affairs. I managed them as well as I could. But finding new clients, hiring staff, dealing with complex issues, that was beyond my capabilities, so I'm very happy where I am." "Yeah, to many, business seems like a beautiful picture where money is made effortlessly," added Rebecca. "But how much hard work is behind it? The challenges and failures. Only those who have stood at the helm of the business know." Melvin once again projected these thoughts onto himself. He was 100% ready for both the challenges and the workload. Most importantly, Melvin understood that this was the way to reach a new level. Rebecca immediately supported her beloved's idea when he shared his plans to open an auto repair shop. Yet, Rebecca refrained from giving advice, despite her extensive experience in entrepreneurship. She understood Melvin. It was important to do everything on one's own. Now Melvin had the sum from selling the car, which he didn't have to spend on a private detective. This significantly eased the task. Melvin was scouting locations, looking for workshop equipment, and calculating the budget. A few days ago, he had repaired Frances Neal's Mercedes. Felix, her husband, pleased with the result, immediately recommended Melvin to acquaintances. "I heard you're planning to open your own shop, Melvin?" Felix asked. "Yes, I am," Melvin replied. "What's your concept for the auto repair shop? Are you thinking small scale or more extensive?" Felix inquired. "I plan to open a respectable workshop with quality service, and nothing extra," said Melvin. "Well, that's a sound strategy. I approve," nodded Felix. "Listen, I have a commercial space. The tenants are moving out at the end of the month. I can rent it to you. It's perfect for an auto repair shop. You're a good mechanic. Let your business flourish. I'll be directing all my acquaintances to you." I don't even know what to say. I'll be very grateful to you for this, Felix. "And I thank you for the changes that happened with Bill after that incident," Felix smiled. "Firstly, I was very proud to hear how he behaved in that critical moment. He didn't back down. And secondly, Bill said he doesn't need any other car. This one is enough. He plans to earn a new one himself." "You've just raised him to be a decent person," replied Melvin. "Yes, at first he seemed unserious, even arrogant to me, but as it turned out, it was just a manifestation of his age. If it weren't for Bill, who knows how all this would have ended." "And their son." Felix nodded towards the street. The gate slowly opened, and the same car from which Bill and Angela had emerged entered the premises. "Well, it's time for me to head to work, and you guys can go inside the house. They'll feed you right away," the man said warmly. "Melvin, I can give you a ride to town." "Oh, could you possibly stay a bit longer?" Bill suddenly asked. "I have a couple of questions about the car." "Of course I can stay," Melvin said. As soon as Felix's car pulled away from the house, Bill and Angela approached Melvin and handed him a paper bag. Inside was the same bracelet. "We're returning to you what belonged to Rebecca," Angela said with a smile. "This bracelet turned out to be truly lucky. Thanks to it, you saved her. And I saw a different side of my Bill. realized how brave and cool he is. So it seems the bracelet not only brings happiness but also opens eyes to many things. Melvin winked. By the way, all over social media there are photos of Rebecca and this whole story, Angela said. She's a very beautiful woman. And what a cool business she has. I've been to Magnolia Cafes more than once. The pastries there are just incredible. I'll definitely pass that on to her, Melvin smiled. Although you can tell Rebecca in person. We're having a wedding soon, and we invite you as our honored guests.